For 20 years as the oldest sister, I thought I was used to every kind of trouble Lila caused. But at 2:12 p.m. that afternoon, inside the security briefing room of the Treasury Department, my phone vibrated with a chilling red message. Breach a 13, accessed, unknown. I opened the camera, and my heart stalled. On the screen was Lila, standing in the living room of my apartment in Philadelphia, calm as if she were in her own home. But what made my skin go cold wasn't her presence. It was the way she entered the exact door code issued only to federal personnel, a code no one but me had ever known. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't between two sisters anymore. It was the beginning of a storm my family was not prepared to face. I tilted my phone slightly, trying to keep my fingers from shaking. Even though the conference room was always kept at a comfortable temperature, the feed from my Philadelphia office camera kept streaming in with such sharpness. I could see every strand falling from Lila's loose bun. She bent toward the door of my workspace, her hand moving with a level of skill that could not be coincidence. I knew that sound well, the sound of a pick kit designed for dual-layer security locks. The soft taps of metal touching metal echoed steadily, as if she had practiced dozens of times before stepping into my apartment. The lock clicked open with a tiny snap. Lila pushed the door in without hesitation, as if she were the one paying rent every month. A cold line crawled down my back, not because the conference room around me was silent enough that I could hear someone flipping a page, but because I was witnessing something I had never imagined my sister. The girl who once cried for losing a cheap bracelet when she was 16 was now breaking into the system I used to store federal investigation materials. Lila stepped into my workspace with a mix of curiosity and smugness, like she had just won a game only she knew the rules to. She glanced quickly at the secondary camera mounted on the bookshelf, a camera almost no one ever noticed, then casually reached up and removed it. Her movements were precise, clean, without a hint of fumbling. I held my breath. Lila had never had this ability. Never. I zoomed in. She was pulling the third drawer on the right, the drawer I locked from the inside. But instead of tugging like someone who didn't know the mechanism, Lila pulled a small magnetic card from her coat pocket and swiped it across the groove at the exact angle. The drawer slid open smoothly. She knew. Or someone taught her. I lowered the volume to its quietest setting, avoiding attention inside the room. At the very least, I wanted to hear if Lila said anything. But she stayed completely silent. She turned to the framed picture on the wall, a structural map of the Treasury Department that everyone thought was just a boring souvenir. I hung for fun. She lifted it, flipped it over, then paused for a second like she was confirming she had found the right thing. My heartbeat dropped to my stomach. The two-layer safe sat exactly there, with an electronic keypad outside and a mechanical disc lock inside. I had always assumed only technical security staff at the department could open it besides me. But Lila placed her phone on the safe, opened an application I had never seen before, and scanned the entire keypad. Characters lit up in sync with the scanning flashes from her phone camera. 36 seconds later, the system displayed, access pending. 10 seconds more. A click sounded, the unlocking sound I knew too well, but had never hated this much. Lila pulled the safe door open, her eyes lighting up as if she had found treasure. She took out two things, a thick red stamped folder labeled Aurelius Case and a heavy metal box sealed with the Treasury's tamper-proof tape. Inside that box were investigation securities worth $600,000, used as evidence in a cross-border money laundering case. They weren't just documents. They were bait, proof, monitored assets. They were under my temporary custody. If they went missing, not only would I lose my job, the entire 6-month investigation could be frozen. I looked around the conference room. No one was paying attention to me. Everyone was focused on the international risk charts the team lead was presenting. I forced myself to breathe, turning back to the screen as Lila opened the box. She lifted the stack of securities, her eyes widening not because she understood what they were, but because they looked valuable. The soft purple anti-counterfeit paper, the silver patterns reflecting light, to someone outside the field, they resembled some kind of rare vintage bond certificates. She pressed her lips together, nodded slightly, and placed everything into her handbag, a soft beige leather bag she often carried to trendy cafes with friends. As if she believed she would walk out safely. As if someone guaranteed it. Lila closed the safe carefully, even wiping fingerprints with her sleeve, a habit I had never seen in her. She rehung the frame, walked out of my workspace, and shut the door with just the right amount of force to avoid noise. She walked to the apartment door, adjusted her hair in the hallway mirror. and even allowed herself a faint smile, the kind she wore only when she felt she had done something clever or praiseworthy. The door shut. The camera switched to standby, every movement of hers smooth, steady, confident, spelled one thing: she had prepared. Not the impulsive or rushed kind, but the kind that was trained, guided. Someone had told her, the building code, the time I'd be away, the location of the secondary camera, the weak point in the drawer lock, the method for opening a 2-layer safe. Even the name of the file she needed to take. I placed my phone face down on the table, trying to keep my hands from showing tension, but my heart kept pounding as if trying to warn me about something much bigger. Because at the same moment I saw Lila step out of my apartment, I also saw painfully clearly the entire life my family had always dismissed as just your little office job. If they knew the conference room I was sitting in held the financial maps of organizations they only read about in the news. If they knew how many sleepless nights I spent tracing hidden money routes. If they knew every decision I made could affect millions of people. But they didn't know. And Lila, whether intentionally or not, saw everything I protected as something she could simply toss into a bag and take away. I felt a quiet wave rising inside me, not from anger, but from betrayal. Not exactly because Lila took federal assets, but because she stepped into my life as if I had no right to draw boundaries. As if what I safeguarded never mattered compared to what she wanted. I reopened my phone, replaying each clip. Every viewing felt different, sometimes painful, sometimes unbelievable, sometimes sharper and colder than the surveillance footage itself. One small detail made me pause on the fourth replay. When Lila removed the secondary camera, she glanced toward my bedroom door, as if debating whether to enter, just for a fraction of a second. But that fraction said so much. She didn't come only for the folder. She came to look for something else, something I didn't know, or never imagined she knew. I tapped my finger lightly on the table, trying to sort through the thoughts stacking up in layers. My professional instincts began to activate, looking at every small detail, every inconsistency with Lila's habits, every action that didn't match someone who knew nothing about my work. I knew this wasn't about $600,000, wasn't about one stolen folder, wasn't about Lila. Someone had stepped into my life long before Lila stepped into that apartment, and they knew me more clearly than my own family ever had. I tightened my hand slightly, lifting my gaze toward the presentation screen in the conference room. They were still analyzing risks from a financial organization in Europe. Everything around me remained calm. No one knew my world had just been torn open. But I knew. And I also knew I was about to enter something bigger, more complex, and more personal than any case I had ever handled. I would have to face it. Not just because my job required it, but because I needed to know who had led Lila into my life this way. I left the conference room right after the presenter moved on to international money flow analysis. No one asked why I stood up. In this environment, people understood that sometimes there were signals only insiders recognized, and the best response was to let the person handle it. The long hallway with deep blue carpeting led toward the internal security offices like a tunnel I had walked through thousands of times. But today, each step felt heavy, as if I were walking underground. I held my phone to my ear, calling the Treasury's 24/7 emergency line. "This is Carter. There's a Level A security breach at my apartment. I need the system to check all access related to my files within the last hour." I didn't need to identify myself. The system recognized my voice and encrypted the call. The voice on the other end belonged to a man I'd known for years. Caleb, the day and night shift operator who always joked he belonged to the building more than to his own family. "Give me a moment, Noelle. I'm extracting it now." Keyboard clicks sounded. I leaned against the wall, forcing my breathing to steady. I heard Caleb take in a sharp breath before he continued. "There was unauthorized access." His voice dropped. "More specifically, someone logged into your file about 32 minutes ago. Using whose credentials?" I asked. Caleb hesitated. Then he answered, weighing each word. "Yours." I opened my eyes, staring at my reflection in the glass panel across from me. "Impossible. The system isn't wrong. Noelle? Whoever logged in used credentials and identification parameters identical to yours. Even the device used is one the system recorded as having connected to your file months ago." I pushed open the glass door into the security support room, where large screens displayed layers of access codes. Caleb turned toward me. His eyes held no curiosity, only professional alertness. I sat in the chair beside him. "Find the access location," I said. He typed a few more commands. A red circle appeared on the internal map. I looked at the blinking numbers on the screen. What's the address? Caleb tilted his head. Not here. The access came from a device near Philadelphia, very close to your apartment. Can you identify who used the credentials? No, they used a Tier 3 VPN, not the common kind. The kind only people who once had internal clearance would know how to use properly. A soft click sounded in my mind like two puzzle pieces. Locking together, Lila didn't know the safe's location or the secondary camera. She didn't know internal codes. She didn't know the drawer's internal locking mechanism. She didn't know which hacking app worked on a Treasury security safe. Lila couldn't have done all of that herself, but someone else could. Someone who once had reason to access me. Someone who understood the Treasury system. Someone who had undergone the same security vetting. Someone who had held the list of people authorized to keep classified documents, including me. Caleb looked at me as if he had read my thoughts. Do you want me to lock down all your files? Lock everything. Suspend my access, my subordinates, and my peers. Caleb flinched slightly. Noelle, that means you won't be able to access anything while this is active. I know. I spoke slowly, clearly, but if someone has used my identity, I don't want them to have one more second inside the system. Caleb executed the command. A small beep confirmed it. My reflection on the screen looked back at me calm to the point of frightening. That feeling wasn't unfamiliar. I had been in this exact state when I first touched the Aurelius case last year. When we traced the trail of a group using Baltic banks to cycle illegal funds in a near-perfect pattern, Caleb turned his chair, looking at me with a heavier expression than usual. Do you suspect anyone? I intended to answer. But the question was too big to speak immediately. Yes, I said softly, but I need proof before I say the name. So what do you need now? I need the full log of all transactions in my file for the past 2 weeks, including unsuccessful access attempts. And... I paused. A list of who viewed my resume in the last 6 months. Caleb blinked. Your resume. Who would? I just need you to do it. He didn't ask further. He knew that sometimes answers only emerged when all the data was there. While Caleb downloaded the logs, I stepped back into the hallway, the white ceiling lights making everything in my mind feel sharper. I walked to the large glass window overlooking the street. The traffic below kept moving calmly, as if this world were too distant from access codes, safes, classified files, and the questions I was facing. One image kept replaying in my head. Lila's expression when she slipped the Aurelius file into her bag. Not the look of someone stealing in a rush, but the look of someone carrying out an instruction. I tapped the screen gently, replaying the moment Lila glanced toward my bedroom door. Just a sideways flick of her eyes, but enough to make something deep inside me tighten. She hadn't come only for the Aurelius folder. There was something else she was after, and that disturbed me more than the safe itself. She came looking for something else, and that unnerved me more than her breaking into the safe. I walked back into the room just as Caleb said, "The logs are done. But there's something you need to see right now." I stood beside him. On the screen was a list of everyone who had viewed my file in the past 6 months. The supervisors, the security division, the financial protection team. But one line froze my entire body. A name I did not want to see. A name I had tried to keep locked in the past. Like a weakened door I didn't dare open. Caleb pointed at it. This one doesn't work at the department anymore. He left 8 months ago. His viewing your file isn't part of any protocol. Evan Pierce. Former senior technical security specialist. A man who once had the right to see system codes, secure safe locations, internal camera configurations. A man who once knew every security layer surrounding me. And a man I once loved. If Evan viewed my file, if he had system codes, if he understood how I secured my home, then it wasn't Lila, but him who could have placed the key to my life into someone else's hands. I heard Caleb ask from somewhere behind me, "Noelle, are you all right?" But I just stared at the screen, where that name blinked like an alarm I had ignored for far too long. Lila was only the surface. Someone else was the one touching the deeper layers of my life. "Caleb, I need everything on Evan last login, any devices he ever used, any access attempts under his account after he left the department." Caleb hesitated. "He isn't authorized anymore." "That will take time." "I can wait," I said. "But we need to start now." I looked at the line on the screen one last time, feeling as if I were standing exactly at the beginning of a story. I wasn't sure I had the courage to dig all the way through, but I knew I no longer had a choice. Because if someone led Lila into my apartment, Then the real question wasn't why. It was, what do they want from me? I drove back to Philadelphia in the late afternoon traffic, the streetlights blurring behind the fogged glass. I didn't turn on the radio the entire way. I needed the silence. A place for the burning questions in my head to drift through. Layer by layer, I still hadn't told anyone, not even Caleb, that Lila had opened the safe. The fewer people who knew, the more clearly I could see who was behind her. When I turned onto the old street leading to my parents' house, I immediately recognized the cars: Lila's white Range Rover, Uncle Mike's pickup, my parents' sedan. Warm light leaked through the dining room curtains. The familiar glow of a weekend family gathering I once knew so well it became routine. Before work swallowed every holiday except phone calls, I stopped the car, shut off the engine, and sat still for a few seconds. It felt like preparing to walk into a room whose layout I knew by heart, but not knowing who might be waiting in the shadows. I opened the door and stepped out. The late evening air was colder than I remembered. As I reached the porch, laughter floated out: my mother's, Lila's, someone raising a glass. Those sounds didn't match what was inside Lila's handbag, or what I had watched on a screen just hours earlier. I used the old key, turned it once. The door opened with the smell of roasted chicken, wine, and something that made my throat tighten: the scent of the house I grew up in. My mother turned first. Her face brightened like a small lamp. "Noelle, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I took off my coat, keeping my voice steady. "I was just passing through and made it in time, so I stopped by." The chatter around the dinner table gradually faded as everyone turned to look at me. My father, Uncle Mike, even Derek, Lila's husband, looked surprised, but only one person smiled broadly, eyes shimmering with the kind of confidence meant to show off. Lila. She set down her glass, stood up, her blonde hair falling softly over her shoulders as if she had just stepped out of a photo shoot. "Noelle," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "I was just telling everyone about the surprise I found today. What a coincidence that you're here." I didn't react. I walked in, pulled out a chair, and sat at the table like a polite guest, trying to keep order at a family dinner. My father placed chicken on my plate. "Today, Lila made us proud," he said, excitement in his voice. "Derek says the new investment has huge earning potential." I looked at Derek. His eyes darted away like someone who wanted no part in something he didn't fully understand. Lila smiled, swirling her wine. "That's right. And all, thanks to you." I lifted my eyes. "Thanks to me." She leaned toward me, the mischief in her gaze sharp and artificial. "I found a few things you kept for too long, without using them. Such a waste, so I thought I could help make them profitable." I glanced at the large leather bag under her chair. I recognized the faint outline of the Aurelius case folder beneath the smooth leather. No one else at the table noticed, or rather, no one understood. My mother chimed in, pride glowing in her voice. "Noelle, you know, Lila is so lucky. We're talking about investing for the kids' future too. Perfect timing." "What did you take?" I asked. Lila raised an eyebrow, as if delighted I had finally asked the question she'd been waiting for. She reached down, pulled the bag toward her, and deliberately unzipped it so everyone could see. "I brought it for the whole family to look at. It's not every day someone finds something this valuable in a federal officer's house." The comment made my father chuckle, and my mother nod proudly, neither understanding what valuable truly meant. I watched Lila open the bag. The classified folder with the red restricted seal appeared under her hand like an old photo album. Derek frowned. "Lila, are you sure? Don't make everything so serious." She cut him off. "She left it sitting there unused. A good financial advisor can turn it into thousands." My father raised his eyebrows. "Thousands, really?" I placed my hand on the table to steady my voice. "Lila, when did you take it?" "I stopped by your apartment. I used Mom's key to get in. You weren't home." She shrugged, as if it were nothing. "You know, I've used that key since college." My mother laughed softly. "She's always been the most trustworthy one in the family." "How did you get into my workspace?" I asked. The clinking of silverware stopped. Lila propped an elbow on the table, still wearing that thin, smug smile. "That lock was easy. Noelle, I watched a few tutorial videos. Your lock is actually kind of old." I couldn't help looking directly at Derek then. Panic was written all over him. He glanced at my mother, then my father, then back at the folder in his wife's bag, as if he had just realized this belonged to a world far beyond what he knew. Lila didn't notice the tension spreading across the room like an oil slick. She pulled out the metal box with the anti-tamper seal. "Here, see. Doesn't it look like those old-time stock certificates?" I thought I could use it to invest in the kids' education fund. My mother clasped her hands. Oh, Lila, you always think of family. I looked down at my hands, then at the metal box. I knew exactly what was inside. I knew its weight, its consequences, and I knew that even though Lila didn't understand, she had touched something she was never meant to touch. Derek swallowed hard. Lila, did she give you permission to take this? She turned to her husband, slightly confused. Not take, borrow, I told you already. You don't have the right to remove those from her apartment. Lila laughed. Noelle, you sound ridiculous. You keep piles of documents in a safe. You don't use them. I'm helping you use them. Otherwise. Were you planning to let them rot in there? My father cut in, clearly siding with her. It's just paperwork, Noelle. Your family. Why are you making such a big deal? All my life, my job forced me to stay silent, to keep secrets, to say nothing in the face of curiosity. My family never understood that silence. They mistook it for distance, for mediocrity, and Lila's laugh, soft, sweet, careless, cut into that silence deeper than any knife ever could. She placed her hand on the folder, pushing it lightly toward me as if she wanted to show off a trophy. You should thank me, thanks to me. These things can finally be put to good use. Derek immediately touched her hand, speaking low. Lila, you shouldn't. But she pulled her hand back, frowned at him, then looked at me as if waiting for me to laugh, congratulate her, or approve. You took it. For who? Lila blinked, the confidence on her lips faltering just a little. For who? What do you mean? Don't say for you. You don't know how to pick a lock. You don't know how to open a 2-layer coded safe. You don't know where the secondary camera is. You don't know which file is under investigation and which one is just a draft. I saw my mother glance at my father. My father looked at Uncle Mike. No one understood what I was talking about, but I knew Lila understood, because her face changed instantly. I leaned down, placing 2 fingers on the edge of the metal box. Whose instructions were you following, Lila? She stepped back a small inch. Just small, but I saw it. And Derek saw it too. Lila opened her mouth, but the words caught somewhere in her throat. I looked straight into my sister's eyes. Those eyes had once been clear, once carefree, once certain that I was the sister she could rely on at any moment. But today in those eyes I saw only one thing. Someone was standing behind her. I didn't look at Lila immediately. Next, I kept my gaze on the center of the dining table where the warm yellow light fell onto the wooden surface, creating a quiet halo, like the only space left to breathe between the waves, rising around us. I felt every gaze in the room fixed on me, but that no longer mattered. There are moments in life when silence is no longer the safe choice. I placed both hands on the table, interlaced my fingers, and began speaking, not loudly, but clearly enough for each person to hear. Maybe. It's time everyone knew what I actually do. The air seemed to contract. My father stopped chewing. Derek set down his wine glass. Lila straightened, tense, as if she had just dropped her most important card. I don't do paperwork. I don't sit at a desk. I work for the International Securities Fraud Investigation Unit of the Treasury Department. Uncle Mike cleared his throat, clearly not understanding. You mean, you investigate people who avoid taxes? I shook my head. No one here had enough reference points to imagine the scale of my job, making the next sentence even harder to say. I track cross-border money laundering networks, underground conglomerates, black market financial groups that slip into the U.S. banking system, money that can fund terrorism, weapons trafficking, or destabilize markets. Derek's eyes widened. You mean, like the things on the evening news, those cases where Europe had its accounts frozen a few years back? Yes, I answered quietly. And sometimes worse. The table fell into absolute silence. I turned the metal box slightly under my fingertips, feeling the cold edge. What you brought here isn't old stock certificates, not vintage bonds, not forgotten money. It's federally monitored securities tracked by national security systems, frozen assets, evidence in an active case. Lila bit her lip, but I didn't know. Her eyes wavered, like someone standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind pushing them forward. And the folder you took, I continued, is classified material from the Aurelius case, a laundering network linking 3 countries, 4 banks, and dozens of offshore accounts. We've been tracking it for 8 months. I saw Derek's hand tighten around the chair. My father frowned, searching for a simpler explanation in his head. So, what you're saying, my father began, but his voice caught. What Lila took? How serious is it? Dad, I said softly. She touched an asset that anyone who lays a hand on gets flagged. And when she opened this box, the Treasury's system recorded the signal. When she took it out of my apartment, the system set an alert. When she called a financial advisor or someone to ask whether it had value, the entire system knew. My mother lifted her hand to her mouth. She looked at Lila, then at me, then at the box as if it could explode at any moment. Lila pushed her chair back, trying to keep her voice steady, but fear coated her words like a thin fog. I didn't do it on purpose. I thought it was something you didn't need. I didn't understand. No one told me. Right, I said. No one asked. No one ever wanted to know what I do. Everyone always assumed my job was stable, ordinary, nothing special. And because no one understood, you thought everything in my apartment was ordinary. Derek turned to Lila. Did you ask anyone before you took it? She pressed her lips together, then lowered her head. Then my father spoke. His voice shakier than I had ever heard it. Noelle, does this mean Lila has to face? I didn't answer that question, not because I wanted to avoid it, but because it wasn't time yet. Instead, I gently slid the metal box toward the center of the table and placed 2 fingers on top of it. I want everyone to understand one thing before this goes any further. I don't have the authority to forgive anyone who touches this asset. Not because I'm the oldest, not because I'm strict, but because I'm bound by federal law. If I ignore this, I become an accomplice. Lila jerked back, her eyes widening, like a child realizing for the first time that not every action can be repaired with a simple apology. What do you mean? You can't let them. You can't just... I placed a hand on the corner of the table, keeping my voice even. Lila, this isn't a family matter anymore. Uncle Mike rubbed his face, as if suddenly realizing every escape route had just slammed shut. I looked at my mother. She was shaking her head slowly, eyes reddening. All my years in this family, I had never made them half as proud as they were of Lila, and now, for the first time, they had to face a brutal truth. Lila didn't just accidentally take her sister's things. She stepped into a territory you cannot walk into without paying a price. I said the last thing they needed to hear, the thing no one wanted to hear. Everything Lila took isn't mine. I emphasized each word. It belongs to the United States government, and once it leaves the safe, the government will come for it. And I knew, the moment I said the next sentence, everything would officially reach the point of no return. I looked straight at Lila. My voice was low, slow, but clear as the sound of a lock sliding into place. You have put yourself and this entire family into the sightline of a system none of you have ever imagined. The front door echoed with a heavy knock, not the kind from a neighbor borrowing salt, not the wind hitting wood. This knock had force, rhythm, intention, a sound anyone who has ever been near law enforcement agencies would recognize. In my eyes was the acceptance of someone who knew this would happen long before I left the building in D.C. In Lila's eyes was pure, unfiltered shock. My father shot up from his chair, his face drained. Who would come at this hour? Before anyone could answer, the second knock came stronger, more decisive. A woman's voice rose from outside, sharp, clear, familiar. Treasury Inspector General, open the door. We have a warrant. My mother clutched her chest, her breath escaping as if she had slipped off a stair. Derek turned toward Lila, his mouth open but unable to form words. My father called out, Noelle, what are you going to do? Let me open. No, I said, gently but stopping him cold. They're not here to talk to you. Lila jumped up, shoving her chair so hard it slammed into the wooden cabinet. No, Noelle. You didn't do this to me. You can't. The third knock cracked through the house. Open the door now. This is a federal order. Lila lunged toward me, tears rising so fast I didn't even see the moment they spilled. You have to talk to them. You have to do something. I didn't mean to. You know that. You're my sister. I looked at her, a long look I didn't know how to describe. In it was pain, regret, and most of all, a truth I couldn't soften. It's not me, I said slowly, each word landing like a weight on the table. It's the system you underestimated. Lila broke down, sobbing, as if that sentence cut into the deepest part of her. My father rushed to open the door, his hands shaking as he turned the lock. The door swung open, and 3 agents stepped in with a female agent in front, holding the warrant. Her badge glinted under the light. Special Agent Collins. She nodded at me, professional, not warm, but enough for me to know she had read my file before coming. Then she turned to Lila. Lila Carter. Lila backed into the wall, eyes wide, breathing fractured. You are under arrest on federal charges related to unlawful possession of government property and unauthorized interference with securities under investigation. My mother cried out, throwing herself in front of Lila as if her small frame could shield her from a federal agency. Please, my daughter is not a criminal. There must be some mistake. Agent Collins shook her head slightly. Not harsh, just with the unshakable clarity of someone who has done this many times. Ma'am, we have video, signatures, and access data. There is no mistake. Derek, pale, stepped forward. Wait, she didn't know. Lila thought it was family paperwork. You have to understand she misunderstood. Collins turned to him, her voice not threatening, just sad. As if she had seen scenes like this far too often. The law does not evaluate intent through second-hand explanations, sir. We evaluate evidence, and in this case, the evidence is very clear. Lila collapsed to the floor. I stepped forward to steady her arm, but she jerked away as if I had pushed her into this. You made me lose everything, Lila cried, tears streaking down both cheeks. You always do. You always think you're right. You always think you're better. I kept my voice as steady as I could, because if I let emotion in, I wouldn't be able to speak at all. Lila, you opened the safe. You took the file. You contacted a financial advisor. You left the apartment with federal evidence in your bag. The cameras recorded every second. I looked directly into my sister's eyes. You destroyed your own life, not me. Two agents approached, gentle but firm, helping Lila to her feet. She struggled not violently, but weakly, like a bird realizing the cage door had never been open. My mother lunged toward them. Stop. She just made a small mistake. A mistake. Collins placed a hand on my mother's shoulder, slow, measured, the most humane gesture possible in this situation. Ma'am, this is not the kind of mistake we can overlook. My father stood frozen beside the table, his hands gripping the edge until his knuckles turned white. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain and also accusation. Noelle, you could say something. You could tell them to let your sister go. You're part of that system. I don't stand above the law, I work inside it. Lila reached for me one last time, as if even in despair she still wanted to cling to the person who used to tie her hair when she was little. Noelle. I'm scared. Her voice trembled. I'm scared because I didn't believe consequences were real, but consequences are always real, Lila. Collins nodded to her team. The two agents led Lila outside as her sobs caught in her throat. When the door closed behind them, the house fell into a heavy silence. I stood there, my hands at my sides, feeling light as if I had set down a burden I had carried too long, yet heavy as if my own breath had been pulled backward. My mother collapsed into a chair, looking 10 years older in a single moment. My father moved to the window, grabbed the curtain, and pulled hard enough to rattle the rod. Derek picked up his wife's leather bag left in the middle of the room, staring at it like he couldn't understand how something so ordinary had just rerouted his entire life in one night. I stood still long after the agent's footsteps faded down the porch steps. No one at the table spoke. Only the ticking of the wall clock remained, as if reminding everyone that time kept moving, even when a piece of our family had just been torn away. I didn't look at anyone, not out of pride or resentment, but because I was holding on to the last thread of composure I had, like gripping a railing when a ship tilts sharply. But that composure lasted only a few seconds before my father turned sharply, his eyes red with anger and despair. You got your sister arrested. His voice was tight, yet hoarse and trembling. Too tired to stand firm. How much pain do you want to bring into this family before you're satisfied? I lifted my head and looked at him. I didn't cause anything. I fulfilled my duty. My father stepped closer, each step feeling like a year's wait. Why didn't you say anything to them? Why didn't you ask them to give Lila a chance? I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that walked me into kindergarten on my first day, that watched me graduate, and that had never once tried to understand why his eldest daughter chose a life of quiet duty. If I interfered, I said slowly, then I would be treated as an accomplice. I would lose my career. I would be investigated. And then, I paused. They wouldn't just take Lila, they would take me too. My mother cried again. My father shook his head, refusing to hear anything more from me. Uncle Mike placed a hand on my shoulder. You're not at fault, Noelle. The law is the law. But my father snapped, his voice harsh. The law. You always hide behind the law. But what about family? Lila was trying to help the kids. She had no bad intentions. That sentence, "she had no bad intentions," cut into me deeper than any accusation. Because in that moment, every answer to why Lila dared to do what she did suddenly became blindingly clear. I took a deep breath. "Dad," I said, "Lila didn't do it accidentally. I watched the cameras." She removed the secondary camera, used a lock-picking app, opened a 2-layer safe. "That is not accidental." My father jerked his head slightly, as if I had just said something so unbelievable it felt offensive. My mother clenched her hands, her voice trembling. But how could she even know those things? Lila isn't good with technology. She can't even remember her own phone password. That question, simple, honest, and filled with pain, struck directly at the center of what I had been suspecting for a long time. Then, when Derek walked slowly beside me and placed Lila's phone returned by the agents on the wooden table, the truth began its first split in the road. "This is her phone," Derek said softly, almost afraid to break the air. "She tried to hide it from me, but the last few months, I noticed she kept turning her back when she texted. I didn't think anything of it, but I just checked her message log." He pushed the phone toward me. "Someone taught her how to open the safe." The room seemed to drop in temperature for a moment. I didn't touch the phone immediately. I looked at Derek's face. He wasn't lying. I knew too well the look of someone struggling to face the betrayal of the person they love. I unlocked the device using the PIN Lila had kept for years, 6 digits, her birth date. The screen lit up with messages, call history, and one thread that caught my attention instantly, a series of texts from an unsaved number, labeled only as unknown contact. I tapped it. The screen filled with messages sent to Lila, dense over the past 3 weeks. "Here's the building code. The secondary camera is behind the frame. Remove it using the instructions. The safe has an electronic lock and a disc lock. Use this app. The file is in the 3rd drawer. The metal box is valuable. Take both." There were no replies from Lila, only instructions. Derek whispered behind me. "She told me she found some notes at your place, but I guess this is the real story." I wanted to believe the sender was some threat, someone trying to destroy the Aurelius file, a suspect in the laundering network. Anything except what I knew was forming in my mind. I scrolled down. A newer message appeared. "Don't worry, Dad will handle the rest." Derek saw my reaction. "What is it?" A photo loaded someone's desk. On it was a schematic of the exact model of safe I used, a row of codes, 4 letters, 6 numbers, and handwriting in the corner. "Noelle won't use this. Don't be afraid." I heard my mother gasp. Then the scrape of my father's chair. "This." My mother stammered. "Noelle, you mean someone used your father's name?" I lifted my head, and I wished I could say, "Yes, someone impersonated him." I wished I could say, "Someone is targeting our family." I wished I could say anything other than the truth staring back at all of us. "No one impersonated him," I said. My father snapped his eyes to me, his face collapsing as if someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. "You," his voice cracked. "You're saying it was me." I scrolled to the final message sent to Lila, timestamped 2 nights ago. The safe code came from Alan. "He still has the old clearance. Just do it. Your sister has plenty. The government can print more paper." Alan, the former security officer who had been my father's close friend for 30 years, a man who once worked in the Treasury's technical department, a man I had met exactly once when I was 23. My father's hand slipped. The chair behind him crashed to the wooden floor with a heavy thud. He sat down, holding his forehead, as if the entire world had tilted and he couldn't find his balance. My mother whispered, voice shaking, Why would you do that? Lila is young. But you. Why would you think the things Noelle keeps are useless?" He swallowed hard, his voice ragged. "I was trying to save your sister. She's about to lose her house. About to divorce. Your mother cries every night. I didn't know what else to do. I just stood there listening to the truth fall from the mouth of the man I once believed would always draw a firm line between right and wrong. I thought," he continued, "the things you kept were just papers, you never used them. The government, they can print more." He gave a dry, brittle laugh, a sound that chilled my spine. "My mistake was not understanding your job, so I thought, taking a little, no one would notice." My mother gasped. "You gave Lila the safe code?" He bowed his head. "I only wanted to pull her out of the hole she dug. I didn't know she would go that far." I looked at my father not with the eyes of a daughter wanting to accuse him, but with the eyes of someone realizing that the deepest crack in her family didn't appear today. I placed the phone on the table, then looked straight at him. "You didn't save Lila," I said. "You pulled her into this spiral. You taught her to believe the law doesn't apply to our family. That consequences only belong to other people." He lifted his head. His eyes were wet. The man who taught me strength looked like he was falling apart. I had never imagined I would one day stand in a federal courtroom as a witness, instead of an investigator. The polished wood of the benches, the pale overhead lights, the whispers trapped at the throats of those watching. Everything felt familiar professionally, yet painfully foreign personally. I sat in the third row, only a few steps from the witness stand. Derek sat 2 rows away, his hands clenched on his knees as if trying not to break. My mother sat between me and my father, her silver hair falling as she bowed her head in silent prayer. And my father sat motionless, his hands clasped before his mouth, looking at no one, not me, not the room, not Lila, who stood at the front with light gray pre-trial clothing and soft restraints on her wrists. The prosecutor spoke first. The cameras recorded Lila picking the lock to my apartment using professional tools. The safe-cracking app was opened from Lila's phone. The $600,000 federal securities box was found in her car. The instructional messages, the safe schematic from my father's desk, the internal access code sent from the device of my father's friend. This, the prosecutor said, his voice neither heavy nor soft, shows that the defendant did not act alone. This was planned, prepared, and supported by a family member. Lila's attorney immediately stood to argue. He said Lila was a victim of family pressure, of a momentary mistake, that she did not understand the true value of the securities, that she mistakenly believed they were family assets. But Lila herself, in the moment she was allowed to speak in her own defense, collapsed everything her lawyer tried to build. She cried. Tears fell uncontrollably. But her words did not go in the direction anyone hoped. "I thought my sister always had more than me. I thought she didn't need those things. I thought the country is big, the assets are plenty. Whatever she kept didn't matter." She paused, wiped her eyes, then continued, her voice small but echoing across the room. "I was wrong. And now I'm paying for it." When it was my turn to take the stand, the court instructed me to answer only the questions, not to comment emotionally. But emotion didn't need words, it's there in the eyes. The prosecutor asked one question at a time. "Do you confirm that the documents taken were federal assets in active investigation?" "I confirm." "Do you confirm that the securities were monitored and held national value?" "I confirm." "I have to reality. Do you confirm that the defendant had no legal right to possess them?" "I confirm." "Do you believe the defendant's actions endangered the financial security of the nation?" I looked at Lila, her eyes red, her face more exhausted than the night she was arrested. I inhaled slowly, then said, "Yes." Derek bowed his head toward the floor, his hand trembling. My mother let out a sob. My father turned away, his jaw twitching, the sign of someone suppressing a feeling too deep to name. The prosecutor turned to my father. He was not a defendant, but the court allowed questioning due to his involvement. "Did you send the safe code and the safe diagram to your daughter?" My father stayed silent. "Did you use old clearance from your friend to obtain the code?" He closed his eyes. His attorney shot up, demanding the court strike the question. The judge agreed, but my father's silence answered everything. I looked at my mother, she was frozen, her small shoulders shaking. The trial lasted 8 days. From access logs, messages, camera footage, phone location reports, to the testimony of my father's friend who admitted he thought he was helping an old friend resolve a family issue. In the end, the jury took only 3 hours to decide. Guilty. On all counts. Lila stood there, her hands trembling, her lips moving but forming no sound. I saw the moment every dream, every plan, every naive belief she held, shattered right in front of her. The judge spoke directly, clearly. "You did not just steal from your sister. You stole from the United States government. You interfered with a federal case. And you did so because you believed you would never face consequences." When the judge pronounced 12 years in federal prison, I heard my mother scream a sound that nearly ripped the room apart. My father collapsed into his seat. After the trial, my father did not return home immediately. He worked with the inspectors for another 2 weeks, questioned daily with things he never thought he would face in his lifetime. Eventually, they placed him under monitoring for aiding in government property theft, revoked his priority citizenship status, and temporarily suspended access to several administrative services. He wasn't arrested, but he was monitored. And for a man who took pride in his family's integrity, that weighed heavier than chains. The first time I saw my father truly age was not in the courtroom, but 2 weeks later, when I passed the living room and saw him sitting alone, eyes empty, staring at the wall. My mother was nearly collapsed herself. I left the house on an overcast summer afternoon. Derek stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, face hollow. "I know you did the right thing," he said, his voice tired. "But I still don't know what to do with all of this." I looked down the long road, where the evening shadows stretched like two paths, one they would continue on, and one I had not belonged to for a very long time. I transferred to Boston a month after the trial. Not because I wanted to leave Philadelphia, but because the Aurelius case, the case that nearly burned my family down, had opened a new investigative branch connected to a much larger underground financial network. The department needed me somewhere else, closer to the data center, closer to the digital trace team, but maybe I needed to leave too. Sometimes, a city too full of memories can dull the instincts of an investigator. I rented a small apartment on the 27th floor of a building overlooking the Charles River. Clear glass windows, a compact but tidy kitchen, a living room bright enough in the morning for me to drink coffee without turning on a light. The first thing I did after receiving the keys was change every lock, a new access control system, dual encryption, AI motion tracking cameras. Not because I feared Lila, not because I feared my father, but because I had learned the greatest truth from what happened. A key in the wrong hands can open not just a door, but fractures that never close again. My new assignment began quietly, like every other transfer. I didn't tell many people about the promotion. It came on a gray morning when the unit chief called me into a secure room and placed a folder on the table. "Congratulations, Noel," he said. "You're leading the expanded Aurelius team. The total amount laundered is 1.8 billion. Thank you for putting us on the right track." I only nodded. I was not accustomed to letting feelings seep into work, but when I stepped out of the room, I leaned against the railing and looked across the red brick buildings in the distance. Light rain fell not in clear drops, but like a thin veil of mist. I wondered whether somewhere, Lila saw a similar mist in the prison yard. Or remembered the days the two of us skipped school and jumped into the ditch behind the house just to run in the rain for fun. I brushed the thought aside lightly, but firmly. In the days that followed, my schedule was packed with interagency meetings, the Department of Justice, the FBI, FinCEN, and even the financial control units of 3 other countries. The data streamed past me like a river. Hidden money flows, anonymous accounts, fragmented transfers cut into tiny pieces, to evade the system. No one on the team knew my story, and I had no intention of sharing it. On the evening of the 6th day, when the building had nearly emptied, I was still in my office, focused on a strange data segment that had just appeared. The light cast across the desk stretched my shadow long and faint across the carpet. "You forgot the time again," a familiar voice said from the door. It was Collins, the agent who arrested Lila that day. She leaned against the doorway, holding a thick stack of files. "I brought some new documents," she said, "but they don't need to be reviewed right now. I think you've been working for almost 20 hours. I gave her a small smile and bowed my head instead of saying thank you. "The work won't wait for me." She stepped in, set the files on my desk, then looked at me with an expression I recognized instantly, not the look of a colleague, but of someone who could see the wound inside another person. "How's your family holding up?" she asked. The question sounded simple, yet it struck the deepest place in me. I gently touched the old key on my desk, almost without thinking. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe they're fine in their own way. And I'm learning how to be fine in mine." Collins nodded, not asking anything more. She said just one sentence, one I won't forget. "Not everyone understands the value of what they're trying to protect, but that doesn't make it any less important. And people like you protect things not because someone praises you, but because if you don't do it, no one else will do it the right way." She left after that, leaving me alone with the glowing screen and the familiar quiet. I looked out the glass window. The Charles River reflected the city lights in silver patches. And for the first time in a very long time, I realized I didn't need anyone to validate me. I had my work, my responsibility, one I had never run from. Cases that wouldn't solve themselves if I didn't solve them. Money flows that wouldn't stop unless someone tracked them. I picked up the old key and placed it into the small wooden box on my desk. It was a symbol of what had passed, A reminder that some doors open with metal, and some doors open only with trust. I closed the box softly. The Boston night was still long. Tomorrow would begin like every other day. I would keep protecting what I believed mattered. Not because I needed recognition, but because this country needs people who don't wait for applause to do the right thing. I still wonder whether I lost a family, or finally found myself again, but then I remember that some paths are meant to be walked alone. And that's all right. If this story touched something in you, please leave a like, follow, and subscribe to continue more journeys with me. Tell me where you're watching from and whether you've ever faced a moment where you chose what was right instead of what was easy. I'd love to hear your story.